it's confronting when somebody comes in and analyzes things that you've done, and nobody likes to hear that they're wrong or have made mistakes. It can be very offensive to some people, and that's okay.
Welcome to the podcast about communication in business. I'm your host, George Torok. I'm also known as the speech coach for executives because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success. And we do that through one-on-one coaching and group training for the team. And yes, I've been doing that for almost 30 years. Yeah, look at me. I don't look that old. Yes, I do. My guest today is Sonya Corkery. And here's 3 facts that I think you should know about her. 1, in the early part of her career, she had extensive corporate financial experience, including being a financial planner, bank manager, and commercial lender. 2, she has, along with her husband, owned and operated a successful multi-million-dollar electrical contracting business for the past 16 years. This business operated in multiple locations within Australia. Yes, she does have an accent. And 3, she is a mother to 3 amazing boys, and she loves to travel with them and her husband, learning and experiencing new cultures. Sonya Corkery, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Thank you so much, George. That's awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's a delight to be talking with you today. And here we are in opposite parts of the world, sides of the world, and yet we can still connect. Technology can be wonderful at times. Sonya, in your consulting business, which is Clear Plan Consulting, one of the promises that you offer people is that you help them, I'm looking for the phrase here, clean up their business. What does that mean? What does that mean that you come in and you're a janitorial service?
We joke about that because that's now the nickname that we've gotten ourselves, the janitors of the business world, because we come in and we really tie up the loose ends because we can come in with that objective view. You know, we've got business experience, but it's always easier from the outside looking in. It's really difficult when you're in the trenches. So we come in, we assess the business, we do an audit essentially over all of the aspects, and we identify the areas we can assist in. And then we action those areas. And it's just makes that so much easier for the business owner when they're not having to do it all, right? That's how you start. You do everything. And then as you can, you outsource those things to people that have the skill sets that you need to make your life easier.
And what are some of those messes that you see often that need to be cleaned up?
The most common one that we see are the lack of systems and processes in a business. Just there's no framework, just putting out fires every single day, and that poor business owner or that team of the business are just struggling because they feel as though they're kind of running and never catching their tail. So for us, creating an operating system for them to be able to run efficiently, streamline the business and make more money along the way.
And I find that insightful, lack of systems and process. And I'm guessing that many business owners, entrepreneurs especially, have an idea and they think it's a great idea and they think they can just wing it.
Yeah.
They're good.
Yep, definitely. I mean, everybody has a craft. Everybody starts somewhere. They're great at something and they want to be able to deliver that to other people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're great at all of the frameworks that business requires to be successful, right? And I mean, you and I talked previously a lot about communication. If there's not a clear communication system in that business for clients, other team members, through to your specialists, things aren't documented so that they are followed consistently by new people coming in, you know, it's really difficult for them, and they're just not giving themselves that extra chance at success if they don't invest that time to set that up correctly. But the catch is they don't necessarily know how to do that. And that's where we come in and we can do that for them. That's the most prominent aspect that we've seen that needs assistance. I mean, there are lots of areas across the business that might need things, but really when it comes down to it, communication, systems and processes, that's the main part of it.
And writing systems and processes is probably boring for most people.
Yes. Yeah, not everybody loves it. I'm one of those people that love it, and I love data and running numbers and strategic. So, especially if you've got someone who's really creative, George, if they're a creative, it would just bore the brains out of people to have to sit there and try to think of how to create these systems. But when you have people on the opposite end of the scale who love it and are passionate about it, then it just is so much easier for that to happen.
And systems, I take it, are steps in a process that we would follow when this situation comes up, when we get our first call from a prospect. What do we do? What do we do first? And maybe there are some, dividing lines where, well, if they say yes, we go this way. If they say no, we go this way. So that kind of flow chart.
Yeah. George, did you ever read any books when you were younger? They were called like a pick your pathway book. So you could have so many different outcomes, right? So you would have a story when you were a child. You commence the story and then you'd get to a crossroad and it would say, well, if you want to go this way, go to this page. If you want to go to this way, go to this page. So I kind of liken it to that for people who've had that experience as a child. It's really a flow chart, as you said, a step-by-step system saying, well, what is the intended outcome of what you're trying to do? Because you can either go left or right here. What would you like? But what that does is every time you have someone come into your business to train, it basically like halves your training because they literally have to just sit down, familiarize themselves with what you've created, which has only taken the one time to do. And then there's consistency across the board in your business, which to maintain the quality and the communication, that's what we really need, is we need that consistency, and the expectation has been set by that business owner of what they want going forward. So I think, George, it's really seems so simplified, and it can take some time to get it the way that the owner wants it to be. But once it's done, it's done. And it will remain that way until something needs to change.
And let's look at something as simple as, again, a team player talking to clients, whether they get a query by phone or they're meeting them at their location. Would it be a good idea for the systems to include, here are possible phrases, or here are possible questions to pose, and by the way, here's some key words to make sure you get in there. Is that something you recommend?
Yeah, well, when I worked in banking, I worked for a multi-million-dollar huge corporation, and everything was scripted, like everything down to the T. There was role-playing, there were videos, and they really took it to another level. And we're not necessarily saying everyone has to be at that level, but if you are particular about how you want your message delivered, then yes, we can make sure that there are specific phrases or keywords that are used to make sure that they hit all of those points with a prospective client. And then if that message is well received, great. You just keep offering that same across the board, so that it's really a no-brainer when you're training and everybody gets the same conversation, I guess, if that's the way it's intended. Sometimes it's customized. Sometimes people want it to be completely customized to their client and a bit more off the cuff, and that changes per industry, right? So we would look at the industry specifically and we would say, well, based on the findings of the sales in your industry, this seems to work well. What are your thoughts on it? And have that open communication with the owner, getting their feedback. Obviously, they're the expert, and kind of designing it from there.
And a phrase that I would like to see used less is when a transaction's happened in a retail place, say, for example, transaction happened, I bought something, and for whatever reason, I say thank you, for serving. I just say thank you. And what I don't want to hear is no problem.
In Australia, we say no worries. Yeah, but you're right. It's and it's got to feel genuine. We can script a lot of things, but energetically, everybody feels that connection in some way. If they're having a great interaction, great conversation, like what we're having now, it's coming freely, it's flowing, and we feel it energetically. And as we know, people are more inclined to connect with you if they feel that connection. And yeah, it's important to take out those mundane phrases where they don't feel appreciated or important. And they just feel like that they've been frauded, right? They've been sold this thing and they're like, oh, they really didn't care. They just wanted to sell me something. So it is the systems and processes, but that energetic connection with the client and the communication is very important, obviously, in every business industry across the board. To me, that will never change.
And what about systems for getting ready for a meeting or getting ready for a presentation? Do you suggest some type of exercise, systematic way of approaching to get yourself in the right mindset and get your brain working for you?
It's really interesting. And this is what I've been playing with for a long time. And this is what really works for myself. I mean, everybody is different, obviously, so they need to find what works for them. But I always say, for me, Sonya needs to do a favor for future Sonya. I need to do favors for my future self. So if I'm prepping for a meeting, I'm doing myself a favor. So I'm putting myself in the best position for success in that meeting. If I have things that prop up that I need to action that don't happen for a couple of weeks, I'll still do things earlier on to make sure that I'm doing myself a favor down the track. So whether that's booking something for the family or making sure that appointments are taken care of, making notes on that conversation that I'm going to have so that I have a quick refresher before I walk into that meeting and I'll go, oh, yep, that's right, we had that conversation. And by doing that, you're setting yourself up for the best chance of success in everything that you do, but you're also kind of streamlining your life and making it easier for yourself by doing those preparations, right? So everybody is different. Sometimes people just need a few notes. Sometimes people need an agenda set so that every time they go into a meeting, they can keep that structured and moving forward and consistent and flow. So yes, we do offer those kind of micro levels for some people. Some people are the opposite. They're like, no, I need it off the cuff. I need to feel it, and I'll gauge the conversation and move it any way that I kind of feel is natural. So we assess the different personalities and say, well, what do you think works for you? And that's how we kind of move forward from there. But for me personally, I'm always constantly looking at doing a favor for myself down the track. Because if I really need it that day, or if the day is particularly difficult or challenging in some way, I'm always so much more appreciative of the fact that I've done that for myself, in the past. So yeah, George, I think that's pretty important actually.
And I like the sound of that phrase, do a favor for my future self.
Yep.
I haven't heard it put that way before, and it resonates with me because sometimes we get lazy, or we just think we're so hot, we just do everything right. We can just do it, But and that's fine if everything goes well for you this time. But what if it doesn't? What if you now need to adapt to things not going well? So if you prepared, the better prepared you are, you get through those times. So the favor you're doing for yourself in preparing, maybe you're not seeing the full benefit today, but how about next week or the month after that?
Yes.
You need that.
Definitely. Absolutely. And not even just in business. What if once a month you made a huge batch of chicken soup and you froze it, and you were unwell one day and you literally couldn't get out of bed, but you had enough strength to get up and microwave some chicken soup? Like just things like that where little things can give you all the comfort in the world, or just even knowing that you're organized, intrinsically the comfort that gives you inside, saying, I feel contented that I have some level of organization. So then energetically you can move forward and just have a better day, better week, better month, as you said.
And I'm just looking for a piece of paper here because I don't know if I showed you this before, but this is my checklist.
Yeah.
Getting ready for the podcast. And it says first contact to interview. And so these are the steps that I go through.
Yeah.
And I did that because it saves me thinking energy. I don't have to think every time. I already know what I want to do. And I write on there when things are done or check them off. And it sure reduces the amount of energy I need to put into those tasks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, sometimes that's why people wear a uniform, even though they're the business owner and they don't need to, because they don't want to think about what they have to wear that day. And that's the micro level, so everybody has something that works better for them. And I think once you find that and you get that comfort, it just makes things so much easier. We have enough challenges in business every day. We really don't need to do it to ourselves to add extra things on. So that's why I just said, always going to do my future self a favor. And I've stuck by that because for me, it's always worked. And other people that I've worked with have found success in that too, which makes me feel like we're onto something. So I'm going to keep pursuing that and just keep trying to assist people where we can with that.
And your point about the uniform resonates with me because when I think about it, a uniform doesn't necessarily be a uniform. It's just a type of clothes that you wear when you do this activity. So, for example, I have a uniform that gets me ready for the podcast interview. I have a different uniform when I'm going to a business meeting. I usually wear a jacket and I have a different uniform when I am the speaker at the front of the room, because that getting dressed in those outfits puts my mind in that mode of this is what I look like when I do this activity. And when I ride my motorcycle, I have the uniform I wear for that again puts me into that mindset. And I wouldn't wear the wrong uniform at the wrong place because my mind would be confused.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's really important. Mindset is so important in business, and it's the small things that make those differences. I was talking to a friend the other day and she said the same thing. And I said, oh, you just look so beautiful. You're always so put together. And she said, I do that every day because it helps with my mindset and it gets me mentally ready for the day in my business. And that's her way of readying herself. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge the psychological aspect of that and just the importance that it poses to be mentally ready for the day, or mentally ready for each, as you said, like each task is different. And so you show up differently for those tasks because that's how you've learned works best for you. And that, I think, is some of the secret sauce.
And that appearance of how we look, what we wear, that sends messages to ourselves, but that also sends messages to the people around us so that we project a certain image based on how we look, what we're wearing.
Yeah.
If you, and I remember many years ago, I had a doctor who always came in wearing a white lab coat. And I didn't like it because it had some smudges on it. So it made me feel like, okay, he's not clean. Was he just cutting somebody open in the other room?
Yeah.
And it just sent the wrong, I wasn't comfortable in his presence when he walked in that way. Even though he was friendly, but he looked like he should have been in a lab with test tubes, not talking to patients in the doctor's office. And we do judge people by those. When you work with companies and you help them clean up, how do you know that they need help cleaning up? What are the signals that you perceive?
So the outcomes that we look at where they are right now, we can see a few things. We can see the demeanor or stress level of the business owner and the team members under them. We can see that correspond through the sales outcomes in that business. We can see that in the cash flow implications of the business, and if it's feast or famine, because there's no systems in place to, retrieve monies that are owed. We can see that in the staff turnover, the team members that stay and how long they stay. But it's multifaceted. There's so many things that we see, but we look at the outcomes and reverse engineer to what we can identify as the root of that. And it usually comes down to multiple of those things happening all at the same time. You have a stressed out business owner who's not really communicating with their team because there's no means of communication that's consistent. They're not communicating with their clients because they're putting out fires either with their team or other clients. Therefore, that the order may not get filled. Therefore, the client is unhappy and then may not pay on time. Therefore, that affects their cash flow, then their net profits. It's a snowball effect. So when we are completing, our audit, we're looking at the outcomes or where they are right now and assessing backwards. We sit, we listen, we talk to the team if the owner would like us to talk to the team and get the individualized feedback. And then we correlate that and condense that into a singular report and deliver that to the owner and just say, based on our observations, this is what we're seeing. What do you feel about that? How do you feel when I say that to you, that the observation made by your team member was that this is a disorganized organization? It's not professional. How do you feel about that? Objectively. And they might get upset. They might acknowledge that and say, oh, no, I agree. I think we need to make changes. So it's starting the conversation. And, George, you and I talked a lot about communication because really that's the heart of everything. And without that communication, it can be verbal, it can be, physical, you can and get feeling from someone energetically, and the communication can be on paper, like you just displayed with your steps that you had created there, that system. Everything is communication at the end of the day. And we're just trying to make that clear and streamlined so that they get the success and the outcomes that they want to have in the end of the day.
Sonya, after you do your audit and then you deliver your report to the business owner and essentially tell them that they're a bad business owner, they've been bad. And you mentioned that one of the possible outcomes is they might be upset with hearing that. How do you communicate that message to them in a way that they become more willing to accept what you're saying and they understand the need for change, even though they feel that, hey, I built this business. You can't tell me how to do it your way.
Yeah, no, and that's valid. It's confronting when somebody comes in and analyzes things that you've done, and nobody likes to hear that they're wrong or have made mistakes. It can be very offensive to some people, and that's okay. I'm not trying to offend in any way. I'm merely trying to shed light on something that's already there, that's already been created. But it's got to be the willingness to accept that there's something that requires change. I mean, they've reached out to us for some reason. They found it difficult. And it's not always just the business owner, obviously. There's a lot of aspects in that team that, have brought that effect. So it's willing to sit and listen, and we're delivering it in such a way where we can say to them, you are not alone in this. We are doing this for so many people, but what we want you to be doing differently is accepting that there needs to be some aspect of change here. We would like you to accept that by doing the same thing, you're going to have the same outcome. So let's look at changing something in a way that still suits you, but works for the business as well and your team and gives you the outcome that you intend. Because at the end of the day, we're here, we have your back. We're like that friend that's saying the thing that you don't want to hear, but they're saying it because they're your friend. So we have to deliver that in a way that is is gentle, but objective and honest, because without that, we can't help them move forward. And that's what they're paying us to do, is they're asking for a service, they're asking for help, and they're asking for that honesty in that situation. And we really find that that's the best way to move forward for them.
Have people ever called your feedback or called you that you're being brutally honest?
They've never said brutally honest, but they found it difficult and said, look, I really don't agree. And I'd say, that's okay. I can understand how receiving this information can be a lot. I understand that. I've also had to endure, receiving feedback as well. So why don't you sit with that for a while? And, when you're ready to talk a little bit more about that, we can, but we can move forward with other aspects in the business if you don't want to talk about that right now. But it always, George, ultimately keeps coming back to the thing that we haven't changed that needs to change. So they might not address it straight away, but they will eventually address it because it will still become a problem. It just sometimes will take a little bit longer for them to see it. But as I said, everybody runs their own race, their own journey, their own time. So we just have to be patient with them in some aspects, but it just delays their success level if they don't, change it sooner than later. But I mean, George, have you ever experienced that where somebody's come and said to you, hey, I don't think that what you're doing is correct and this is why? I mean, it's confronting.
It is, yes. And it's quite easily to feel that you're being criticized, and here you thought you were doing the right thing, and now someone tells you that it's not, or it appears not. So yes, that can be uncomfortable, and it's tough to say, wait a minute, this person sees it differently than me. Maybe there's something there. Maybe if I just turn off my self-protection mode and listen without feeling damaged, simply, okay, I've made mistakes before. This could be another one. Just listen.
Yeah, but it's like if you're out somewhere and you've had a few beverages and you're saying, I really should go home now. I really should go home now because I know that moving forward, it's probably not the best decision to stay. But they stay anyway. And then they wake up the next morning and they don't feel well, or, something's happened and they can't get ready for the day. And they keep reverting back to the decision that they made. And they said, I've done this every time. I know that's the point where I should leave and go home, but I stayed and the outcome is still the same. So it's the universe, in my mind, giving you those lessons. And until you learn it and change it, it's going to keep serving it up to you. And it's sometimes a hard lesson to take. But if we don't acknowledge that we need to make those changes, it's hard to move forward. It's hard to get an outcome that's different to what you're experiencing. Where
do you find the biggest obstacles that business owners face when they need to change?
Team. Communication with team is interesting at times, especially, in a family-owned business, because that's a different dynamic again, right? I worked and have still worked with my husband for many years. That was extremely difficult in the beginning, very difficult, because I came in to assist him. I'd come from a very corporate career and he had been working on his own for a few years. And it was very much, this is my business. You do things the way that I say. And I would say, well, objectively, I think that we can change this for the better, and this is why. And he was quite shut down initially to ideas that I had. And I basically said, if we can't work this way and it affects our family life, then I need to leave this business. Then we had to work out a way that we could communicate and be open and submit ideas, but look at it objectively for what was best for the business, not what was best for either of our egos, because that's what was coming in. Our ego was really coming into the communication. We were getting frustrated, and things just would not move forward. And ultimately, we weren't doing what was best for the business in that sense. And then it was reflecting on our income, and therefore our family couldn't do the things we wanted. We were both in this business, and if it wasn't successful, it really affected us and our children and everything else that we were doing. So when we come in to a business, if the communication is challenging, or they can't sit and have a conversation or even attend the meetings together, that's a whole another area that we really need to work on and say, well, what does everyone need in this bit? Like, what does everybody need individually? Let's talk about it. Well, I'm frustrated because you've done this and you didn't talk to me about it. So now I've taken that frustration and I'm still running with it. Every time you make a decision, I'm just going to block you. And that's what happens. So yeah, George, communication, that's huge.
How do we recognize that ego is a problem?
It's easy for other people to see it, isn't it? It's really easy for other people to say, hey, I think your ego is stepping in there. And you're right in what you said. That part of your brain that's built to protect yourself, we say the croc brain, the primal part of your brain that's built to protect yourself, comes out at times when it feels that it's being encroached upon, or there might be danger around, or perceived danger. So it's easy to see that outside perspective, but from internal, we really need to be able to objectively stop and say, how I'm feeling right now, am I feeling that way because I'm generally concerned about the outcome of this? Or am I just frustrated because I'm not getting my own way and I don't like it because I've been, upstaged by somebody else, or I feel this way? Because how things are put out by people in your business, so say you have a team member and they've said something, their intention is really good, possibly. They really want to help, and they're just saying, hey, I have this great idea. I think we could do this, but you would need to maybe look at changing this way that you're doing things. And it might be immediately taken differently to how it's intended. And so this offense happens where, it's just come out of nowhere because of the ego part of the brain. And there's so many things on that deep psychological level that, with all the different personalities that come together, can be challenging, so we have to look at things and ask ourselves that question every time. The decision that I'm making right now, is this in a positive way, a positive impact for my team, for the business outcomes and the organization as a whole? Because if I'm trying to do it for my own ego and just for me, then that's not really the best thing for anyone, moving forward. And not even for myself, because then I feel awful when people look at me and go, you didn't really make the best decision there, So that's really what we see, George. I don't know if a lot of other people are seeing it. I don't know if Canada is different to the Aussies, but that's generally what we see.
We've got plenty of egos here, yes. I've run into a few, and probably at times I've been guilty of that as well. For people who'd like to know more about Sonya and her business, they can find her her website at clearplanconsulting.com.au, AU for Australia, and you can find that link in the description below. Sonya, as we prepare to wrap up, if you could talk with a business owner about how they communicate with their team, and you could give them 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice that would just boost their results, what might that be?
I believe it's important to be open and objective about things that are brought to you by your team, because if they have the best intentions, it can only be a good outcome for all. Listen to the people that are on the ground that are doing the positions that you need for your business to operate, because those people are living those roles every day, and you might have not done that role for some time, or you may have never had to do that role in the business. So take on board other people's experiences to be able to map out and plan for that role, because if it is including their role, they really should be consulted. And just look at what you really want to achieve as an overarching overall, and bring your team in don't try to do it always on your own, because it's so much easier to have all these people on board that are really pushing for the outcome for the business and ultimately for yourself that you really planned for. So don't do it by yourself. Reach out for help from your team, from other people, other specialists that can support you in your business journey, and ultimately, make it as least challenging as possible.
Powerful advice. My guest today is Sonya Corkery, reminding you to do your future self a favor. If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.